Okay, so we're really diving deep today into food safety and regulations. It's a world most people don't think much about, but so important. We're going to figure out what it takes to be a food regulatory advisor. And we've got some insights from RoleCatcher to guide us. They're a career platform with a lot of info on this.
Yeah, it's interesting. A food regulatory advisor, they're kind of like the unsung heroes of the food industry. They make sure everything we eat actually meets safety standards, So they're the ones making sure all the food industry practices are following those sometimes very strict regulations, but it's not all lab coats and test tubes.
That's what I was wondering. Is it all just lab work? What does a normal day look like for them?
Oh, it's definitely more than that. Picture this. You're in a busy food production plant, walking the floor, clipboard in hand, making sure everything's up to code. Or maybe you're, really digging into those food labels, making sure the ingredients list is accurate, the allergen information is all correct. You could even be presenting your expertise at a conference. It's a pretty dynamic role.
Wow, okay. Didn't realize it was so hands-on. So to be a food regulatory advisor, you probably need some pretty specific skills. What's the path to get there?
Well, a strong education is key, of course. Think degrees in food science, food technology, nutrition, that kind of thing. And certifications are becoming more and more important too, like becoming a certified food scientist or getting a HACCP certification that's all about hazard analysis in food production. Those can give you a real edge.
Yeah, certifications make sense, especially with regulations always changing and new technology popping up. Being able to prove you have that knowledge is huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got your degree, maybe some certifications. Then what? What's the actual career progression for a food regulatory advisor?
So typically you'd start as an entry-level advisor. You'd be working under more experienced people, learning the ropes, conducting audits, getting into the details of food analysis, really hands-on stuff.
So really getting your hands dirty, figuring out how it all works from the ground up.
Exactly. Then as you get more experience, you might become a junior food regulatory advisor. That's where you take on more responsibility, maybe start conducting your own audits, analyzing samples, even helping to design those all-important food labels.
So moving from assisting to leading, that's a cool step. What comes after that?
Well, once you've really built up your expertise, you'd become, a full-fledged food regulatory advisor. You're conducting those comprehensive audits, using your knowledge to advise companies on their food processing methods, making sure the labeling, packaging, everything is compliant with all those regulations.
So that's when you're really the expert. You've seen it all.
Right. And then you could even aim for a senior food regulatory advisor position that's leading teams, maybe even developing regulatory strategies for whole organizations, potentially presenting at conferences, shaping national policies. Now you're talking about real impact.
Wow, that's amazing. They really are like guardians of the food system, making sure everything is safe at every level.
Yeah.
I imagine it can't always be easy, though. What are some of the challenges that come with this career?
One of the biggest is just staying up to date. Regulations change all the time, so you have to be adaptable, a quick learner for sure. And you need serious diplomacy skills.
Right, because it's not just about the science. It's about working with people, and those can be two very different things.
Exactly. You've got to balance the needs of businesses who want to innovate and grow with those strict food safety standards. That takes real negotiation, communication skills. And, this job carries a lot of responsibility. You're dealing with public health here, making sure food is safe for everyone. It's a lot of pressure to make sure you're getting things right.
No kidding. And with all the new technology coming into the food industry these days, I imagine that adds a whole other layer to the job.
Oh, absolutely. It's a whole new world out there, especially with AI becoming so prevalent. It's changing everything, how food is produced, how it's tracked, even how we analyze potential risks.
So it's not enough to just know the current regulations. A food regulatory advisor has to stay on top of all those technological advancements, too.
You got it. It's crucial they understand how these new technologies impact food safety, how to assess them, how to make sure they're being used responsibly.
Wow. Sounds like continuous learning is a must in this field. That makes me think about something we touched on earlier, networking. If tech is changing so rapidly, how important is it for food regulatory advisors to, network with each other, be connected?
It's not just important, it's essential. And it's not just about finding jobs, it's about keeping up in a field that's constantly evolving, right? I mean, think about it. New regulations, new technologies, new food safety concerns popping up all the time. Networking gives these professionals a way to share their knowledge, learn from each other, stay informed about the latest developments.
So it's like having your finger on the pulse of the industry, knowing what's coming next.
Exactly. And there are so many ways to do that: attending industry conferences, joining professional organizations like the International Association for Food Protection. These are all fantastic opportunities to connect with your peers, share best practices, and even influence the future of food regulation.
Wow, so they're not just enforcing the regulations, they could be helping to shape them too. That's pretty amazing. But it also makes me wonder about communication skills. I mean, you're not just dealing with data and science, you're dealing with people, and often from very different backgrounds.
You're absolutely right. And a food regulatory advisor has to be able to take complex information and explain it clearly and effectively to all kinds of audiences, like breaking down regulations for food manufacturers or presenting their findings to government agencies, even educating consumers about food safety.
So you're not just a scientist, you're an educator and a communicator too. I have to admit, when we first started talking about this, I had this image in my head of like food regulatory advisors being the food police. But it's so much more nuanced than that.
Right. There's this misconception that regulations stifle innovation, when actually a good food regulatory advisor understands their role is to support progress, to help companies find safe and ethical ways to bring new food products to market. It's about finding that balance between protecting public health and encouraging innovation in the food industry.
It's more like instead of just saying no, you're figuring out the how.
Hmm.
Like, how can we make this new food, this new innovation, work safely within the regulations?
Exactly. And that takes a special kind of person, someone who, really enjoys problem solving, who gets excited about those tough challenges, and who's really passionate about safe, high quality food, because that's what it's all about in the end, right?
Absolutely. We've talked a lot about skills and experience, but what about personality? What are some of those, like, innate traits that make someone really successful as a food regulatory advisor?
That's such a good question. Because, yeah, you can learn the technical stuff, but some things you kind of have to have from the get-go. And when
Yeah,
you look at the people who really excel in this field, they're incredibly detail-oriented. Precision is crucial when you're dealing with regulations and safety.
oh, for sure. One little mistake could snowball into something huge.
Exactly. You also need to be analytical, able to see the big picture, connect the dots, spot those potential problems before they even happen. And then, of course, communication and interpersonal skills are a must-have. You're working with scientists, business people, government officials. Everyone's got their own perspective.
It's like you were saying before, that diplomacy piece, being able to see all those different sides and find that middle ground.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe most importantly, you need to have a strong moral compass. I mean, you're on the front lines of public health. Food regulatory advisors have to make tough calls, sometimes under a lot of pressure, and they always have to act with integrity.
It's a heavy responsibility, but
Mm.
so important. I mean, think about it. We all just assume our food is going to be safe and come from reliable sources, but that doesn't just happen magically. It's thanks to these professionals.
It really is. It's a fast-paced, always changing field, and it has so much to offer. And as technology keeps changing how we make and eat food, food regulatory advisors are going to be even more essential.
That's something to think about. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive, I have to say. I learned a ton about a world I knew surprisingly little about. So, to anyone listening, if this sounds like a career you might be interested in, definitely take a look at RoleCatcher. It's a fantastic resource, especially if you're just starting to explore your options.
I second that. It's the perfect place to start your research, learn about different career paths, maybe even find some mentors in the field.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the world of the food regulatory advisor. Hopefully this episode has given you a better understanding of this really challenging, but ultimately incredibly rewarding career.
It's been great chatting with you about this.